Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by one of the premier investigative journalists in this country. He's done great work, Rolling Stone, Guardian, many other outlets, and really blown the whistle on so much of the voter suppression, election fraud that's going on in this country that corporate outlets ignore. Greg Palast, I wanted to start. You found amazing things in Georgia. I wanted to start just if I'm going to go to someone on supposed election fraud and a big
hmm
conspiracy, I'm going to go to you. Have you seen anything that lends any credence to President Trump and his cohorts, um, you know, claims of a widespread election fraud that tipped the election from him to Joe Biden?
Oh, there is massive election fraud committed by his cronies. That's one thing that's not being discussed in the U.S. media. Yeah, they're saying that his fantasy of literally Donnie Jr. said we don't know where these mail-in ballots come from when he was in Philadelphia. They could have come from Mars. Well, Donnie, they don't sell stamps on Mars, so they couldn't have been mailed from there. I do know that. And look, here's the thing. So yeah, massive fraud was committed against voters, especially voters of color, young voters. This is not discussed in America. So yes, Trump is crazy. Well, not crazy. He's crazy like a fox to claim fraud because he wants to overturn the results of the election. But it is not the same as saying that people aren't cheated. Mostly people are cheated. We use the polite term vote suppression, Jordan, but in fact, when someone steals your car, you don't say, my car's been suppressed. My car's been suppressed. It's vote theft, and we've had plenty of it. And it started in Georgia. In fact, and you can use any of that film. I did a 14-minute film, which was released by Leonardo DiCaprio at his site, and about called The Purge. Well, which starts in Georgia. Originally, it was actually called the Vanishing Voters of Georgia. So our whole for 7 years, I've been investigating Georgia as the poster boy of racial vote theft in America. It is the worst, and so and in fact, ironically, well, believe me, Stacey Abrams has been working on this for a long time as an activist and majority leader of the House in Georgia. But in 2014, I came to her and showed her these purge lists, these lists of people being wiped off the voter rolls, and she had never seen this stuff because the Republican rulers of the Georgia plantation, as they see it, even though she was the majority leader of the Democrats, they were doing this in secret, which was against the law. So we've been in Georgia 7 years, seeing yes, and there is massive vote fraud there committed by the GOP functionaries against people of color and young people in Georgia.
And you found in 2019 that they had incorrectly purged about 200,000. Is that correct in Georgia?
Right. The ACLU issued our expert report. We went through the voter rolls of Georgia to see who they had removed because they removed people saying, oh, they've moved away. Okay. Listen, if you don't live in Atlanta, you can't vote in Atlanta legally. If you don't live in Georgia and you live in California, you can't be a Georgia voter. So we went through the list of people that they removed for having moved. And what we found is that 198,351 people that they said had moved had not. We're dead certain of it. We have an exact number because we didn't do some type of estimate or sample. We hired the post office, which you can do. We hired the post office and we hired the experts who verify your address for Amazon and eBay and Google. And they went through the names one by one and found out that the Republican Secretary of State had removed 198,351 people illegally. And, again, now, in the last review we did, I actually went down to Atlanta and met some of the people who had been wrongly removed from the voter rolls, including, by the way, if you watch our film, go to gregpalast.com or go to Leo DiCaprio's Instagram page and Storybook page, and you'll see Christine Jordan. I was there at the polling station in Atlanta when she was thrown out, 92 years old, been voting at the same voting station 50 years. And this is Martin Luther King's cousin. And I actually followed her back to the house that they said she'd moved out of. And there was King's picture on the wall at that house from like 60 years earlier. And sure, it's like, yeah, so obviously she'd been there at least 60 years. But this is the type of, it's heartbreaking. It's Jim Crow stuff. And if, I'm not partisan, but I'm going to tell you right now that there shouldn't have been runoff for the Senate race. That it was a straight up steal. And let's see if they'll let the voters back on the rolls now.
It's interesting because what you're describing, it seems to me, you have all these Republicans and frankly, some people on the left that I don't really get what they're citing. They're claiming that all of these, mysterious ballot dumps at 3 a.m. and dead people voting for Biden and all this stuff. But what you're describing, it's not actually that Trump was screwed, but Biden and Democrats might have gotten even more votes if not for these purges.
100%. And you see what happened, for example, Wisconsin. We did the same analysis in Wisconsin. They were about to purge almost 150,000 people from the voter rolls of Wisconsin, mostly in Milwaukee, suspiciously, mostly Milwaukee, which is an African-American city, and in Madison, which is the center of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. In other words, young black Democrats. And they're about to remove these voters. And we did an analysis, so did others, and we gave it to the Board of Elections, released it publicly, showing that this list was filled with nearly 100,000 wrongly purged voters, or they were about to be purged, including, for example, they said, again, this mover, the mover trick. These people have left. They said Saquonna Taylor had left Milwaukee. We actually met Saquonna Taylor, put her on camera. You'll see her. And I said, why are you voting in Milwaukee if you don't live here? She says, I live here. I said, prove it. She says, well, look at the building behind me, has my name on it. She was a Milwaukee County supervisor. But of course she was trying to vote while black, so that's a crime, I guess, in Wisconsin. But here's the thing. Wisconsin Board of Elections then said, yeah, this list of people that supposedly moved, that the legislature is demanding, we had actually passed a law saying they have to remove these people. They passed a law. They said, well, that's a violation of federal law because you can't just take away people's votes on bullshit information. It's got to be reliable. I don't think the commission used the word bullshit, if I remember. But okay. But so why am I bringing this up? Because when we exposed this con, they did not remove these voters, overwhelmingly black and young. And Biden won Wisconsin by, remember that they're about to remove 150,000 people, at least 100,000 people wrongly. And Biden won by what, 20,000, 30,000 votes now, depending. Right. I don't know the latest count, but so basically they went through with the purge, and Georgia was, well, Biden squeaked by. There's going to be recount. He'll get it, but there should not be a runoff in the Ossoff Purdue race. Whereas in Wisconsin, they stopped the purge, changed the outcome.
Because you've said in previous interviews we've had that they can't steal all the elections all the time if the person being the victim of this suppression kind of overcompensates. So is that kind of what happened here? Like Biden ran up the margins enough that even though they tried to do some fishy things, it didn't work?
Yeah, I mean, understand. Yeah, exactly. As I've said, I wrote a book, How Trump Stole 2020. By the way, it was a warning, not a prediction. And so a lot of people who read our book, made a difference. Because as I say, what I conclude with is they can't steal all the votes all the time. So that, understand, the vote theft in America against voters of color and young people, it's mainly Democratic voters who are targeted. Often by the Democratic Party, by the way. I'm not going to let them off the hook. But the steal is millions, as I point out in my book, At probably 1.8 million people, absolute stone minimum, were blocked from voting. 16.7 million people altogether were purged from the rolls, but some of them actually did die or move, but about half. But a lot of people re-registered, and we helped with that. We got the word out. We created sites where you could see if you were purged, SaveMyVote2020.org, and then re-register. So they still maybe. Again, we figured about a 7.8 million vote steal. And I say, oh my God, that's a lot. And it really is. But it's only, and only is a strange word, but it's only 5%, 4% of the total vote. So you can, if they steal 4%, you just have to overcome it with 5% of the voters.
And let me ask you, because there are actually a lot of progressives, people who voted for Bernie, felt that 2016 and 2020 were rigged against him.
Yeah.
I think there's validity to that.
Yeah.
That look at Trump's claims, they might not think it was completely stolen, but are kind of conditioned to think that all of it's rigged, and that there definitely was election fraud that hurt Trump in this election. I see even progressives thinking that. Do you see anything that they've been pointing out? A county in Michigan, I guess, had votes go from Trump to Biden, and then they saw there was a glitch. Have you seen anything that raises beyond just, maybe there was a glitch, to like a conspiratorial cabal, which is what the Republicans are saying?
It's a fabrication. One, they can't produce it. Let me. they can't produce these fraudulent voters. So where are they? Whereas I can produce the victims of their fraud upon the voters. Mm-hmm. Also, there's a difference. Keep in mind this. If voters are going to steal elections, see, what they keep talking about is voter fraud, voters committing fraud. Okay, you have to have a conspiracy that you can operate where you can get literally hundreds of thousands, even millions of people to secretly coordinate to vote twice, mail in a ballot in 2 states, et cetera. How many organizers have told me, do you realize how hard it is to get people to vote one time, let alone twice? Right. And plus, the second time, say, and by the way, we're going to do this whole conspiracy. There's only 1 million of it, so keep it quiet. Don't tell anyone. All of us millionaires sworn to secrecy. And by the way, if we get caught, it's 5 years in the slammer. And by the way, I know of no one who's ever been caught voting 2 times. They all go to the slammer. And if they're foreign, they're deported. 10 years in prison and then deported. Yeah, you're going to do that to what? Vote for school board, even for the 1 vote for president? Come on. Doesn't happen. It's ridiculous. And they can't show us these bad guys. They tell us, oh, we went through the voter rolls and we found that 50 foreigners voted in Kansas, like Chris Kobach used to say that. And then when you look at the list, it says, and here. Take a look. Here's one of these lists of the illegal people voting twice. I got their list, okay? They didn't know they have a list. And let me tell you, okay? I'm going to tell you what's on it. It's hard to read. Start out with this. Michael Brown of Atlanta. Michael Brown of Atlanta is supposed to be the same, supposedly could vote second time as Michael Brown of Kansas. Now, Michael Brown, common name? I don't know. Well, here's what's interesting. It's Michael Stephen Brown. You can see, I don't know if you can see. Michael Stephen Brown is supposed to be the same voter as Michael T. Brown. Stephen, Michael S. is supposed to be the same as Michael T. Cedric, this is a good one. Sarah Adams, how common could that be? Sarah Adams of Savannah, Georgia, is supposed to be the same voter as Sarah Adams of Kansas, except it's Sarah Catherine Adams of Georgia and Sarah Nicole Adams of Kansas. In other words, when you investigate, I haven't seen U.S. papers actually investigate these fraud claims. I have. I've actually gotten the evidence. They have their secret evidence. They do this McCarthy thing. I've got a paper here. I've got millions of names. So I got their so-called evidence, and what you see, it's complete bullshit, made up, fabricated, and look at those names. Brown and Smith and Wilson and Rodriguez and Garcia and Kim and Ho, it is the racial smell is insane.
Hmm.
It's Jim Crow.
And also, I think in this particular election, Trump and the Republicans kind of primed the pump for exactly this. Before the election, Trump was starting to, stoke things. It's going to be rigged. Mail-in ballots are, not credible. This and that. Now he's saying I won 70 million legal votes. So it seems like we already live in a post-truth society, but it seems like they're trying to create this conspiracy that now if they lose, it's theft, when what you're describing and what you found is they're the ones trying to steal for the most part.
Yes, indeed. And this is one of the big issues, and one of the problems I have with American media is that they are so intent on saying that our elections are all wonderful and perfect when they aren't. But they have to distinguish between voter fraud committed by voters, and fraud, and what we call election fraud, which is fraud committed upon the voters. Now understand, a voter can only steal one vote or a couple votes, if they do extra mailings or something. Very difficult, and you go to prison, and it's very easy to catch them, by the way. Remember, I was a detective. I worked with the Justice Department, attorneys general. I'd catch these guys, bang, don't worry about it. You got them. That's why they don't do it. However, if you are the Secretary of State in charge of elections, like in Georgia, we had Brian Kemp is the governor. How did he become governor? In 2018, 2016, and 17, he started removing voters en masse. Not started, he'd been continuing a program. He removed 340,000 voters illegally. And only a Secretary of State, only a voting official, only a Board of Elections can pull a switch and remove 300,000 voters, bang, like that with a press of a button. And of course, that's what elected him governor he was running against Stacey Abrams. He simply eliminated her voters. So he won, by about 50,000 votes after removing over 1/3 of her voters.
Jesus.
1/3. It's so big that, it's almost like it's not just the elephant in the room. It's the elephant standing on your head, and they're not seeing it. They're not feeling it. And that's my job, has been investigating this, but mostly, I hate to say it, from media overseas, or like, Rolling Stone, the AARP rock and roll newsletter, or the Guardian, BBC television out of London, Al Jazeera, terrorist TV as they think of it. It's very hard. You can't get the American press to take up this issue. I started actually even working this year with the Washington Post, and they said, "Oh, you can't." As soon as I said it's black voters that are being removed, "Oh, we can't talk about that. That's partisan." When you call out racism, they say it's partisan. And yeah, it's true. If you remove black voters, if I'm exposing the removal of black voters from the voter rolls, I'm exposing basically the removal of Democrats.
Right.
No, I'm not partisan. I'm happy if the public really truly voted Trump in. Let's say that there were with Trump 71 million, but only 65 million for Biden, and he won, but not from crushing Biden's vote. If it were an honest vote, and Trump won, I'll live with democracy. I'm not worried about that. But no, Trump was not the victim. His team was the victimizer. I won't say Donald Trump himself. He doesn't have the brain cells to pull off the caper, but he has some really smart, spider-brained operatives who basically make the old segregationists. They were just pikers, because they were, they try to use white sheets to scare off black voters. Now use spreadsheets and just knock them out. Say, "Oh, sorry, you can't vote here."
Well, it also seems, objectively, that this Republican theft, Trump actually increased. He increased +4 black women, +5 black men, +3 Latino women, +4 Latino men. That's shocking in itself that he increased among those categories, according to the exit polls. But maybe he could have done even better if there weren't these massive purges, because for whatever reason, more black women, more black men more Latino women, more Latino men, he did better among those groups.
Well, when you say better, he went from like negative territory into smidgen. So look,
Well, on
these
black people, he
stats,
went 8% to 12%. Not amazing, but better, yeah.
I know, but think of it this way: when they play these purge games, by the way, they do it. They are statisticians. They're not removing 10 people; they're removing 100,000 people at a time. So they're not sitting there figuring out each particular voter. So if you remove a Hispanic, the Hispanic voter, the chance is roughly 65% that you're knocking out a Democratic voter. So yeah, you're going to knock out some Republican voters too. If you knock out a black voter, the chance is about 88% that they are going to be a Democrat, voting Democrat or against Trump. So yes, it's true that the minority vote people were shocked but I don't know why, but that Trump sliced off a small percentage of black male vote and Latino male vote. And so I'm not shocked at that, but no, they don't want those voters. I mean, they want little bits that they can win back, but they are knocking off the voters. Also, and by the way, one of the things we learned in our investigations, where we took the census tracts, and looked at their race, and then looked at the voters that were removed, and there was a coincidence, not just on race, but on income. This is an important thing. So if you are, for example, if you are Hispanic and you're living in a suburb and you're going to that local evangelical church, you're probably not going to get purged. It's if you live in central Milwaukee and you're working at the local diner and you're low income, then you're likely to be at risk. And there's all kinds of ways that they work this. Because again, like they started doing this thing of saying people who move. Now, who moves? Renters move all the time.
Right.
Now, you're not supposed to lose your vote if you're a renter and you move. We saw people in Georgia who literally lost their vote because they moved within their building. That's against federal law. You move within your county in Georgia, you can't lose your vote. But the people who are itinerant, like students, my daughter is a Georgia voter. She just left Georgia. Because after the pandemic, she left. She was a student in Savannah. And they gave her hell to register. But again, she was moving dorm room to dorm room.
Right.
And so they said, oh, well, you've moved. Well, no, she hadn't left Savannah. And there was no reason. It was against the law to block her from voting. That's the games that they play. So they're they're very sophisticated. They don't, they can't shave it down to, we don't want to get that one guy who's going to vote for Trump. They can't do it that accurately.
And my last question, because you kind of touched on this earlier, that you don't want to let Democrats off the hook. Should people, I mean, obviously we're focusing on Republican efforts, but can you kind of elaborate what Democrats have done, either this cycle or previous cycles, to suppress certain groups and, kind of twist things to their benefit?
Well, when I say I mean, Democrats purge other Democrats. They're very good at suppressing, to use that wacky term again. Democrats are very good at suppressing the votes of the same people that the Republicans go after. Mm-hmm. They're trying to get rid of voters that would be troublesome in primaries. So, right. For example, I did an investigation for the Guardian newspapers this year on the primary in California in California. And we calculated, and it's one of the most stunning, and I'm telling you, these numbers are as solid as can be. Working with the experts, we calculated that Bernie Sanders was shafted this primary year out of 553,000 votes in the primary. 553,000 votes. That's over 500,000 votes. You know what? He's even beat Brian Kemp. The Democrats beat Brian Kemp in terms of just raw number of people being screwed out of their vote and purged. Well, they weren't purged. What happened in California is a brilliant trick. The way I won't go into all the details. In fact, actually, you know what? If you want to get the details, I have in my book, How Trump Stole 2020, which, by the way, it's still important. And the attempt is how they steal elections. It doesn't go away. You can download the audio version or the ebook version at gregpalast.com. But in it, there's and you can also go on the site, see my Guardian report. I call it California Riemann by the Democratic Party. And you see how the Democratic Party plays games to remove basically those young progressive voters and voters of color. Remember, the Hispanic community was completely for Tio Bernie.
Right.
And how they did it. So I'm not going to let them off the hook. There's also a little film that I did for the Guardian on the theft in California. So it's unfortunate and that Democrats get their hands dirty with these games in states where they are fearful of progressives winning primaries. And I've seen that all over America. So this is a problem. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that New Mexico has often had. Here you have literally a white minority state. By the way, Georgia is now a white minority state. One of the reasons why it's flipping, people are shocked. Well, it's a white minority state.
Right.
The first one in the Deep South. But New Mexico has often had Republican officials because Democrats are so brilliant at savaging each other in taking away, suppressing the vote in the primaries. And then it carries, if you've lost your vote in the primary, you're still off the list and you lose your vote in the general.
Well,
I don't want to let Democrats off the hook. This is not a partisan question. This is a question of citizenship rights.
Well, I also think, obviously we know about black voter suppression, but I remember in the primaries, particularly the Democratic primaries in Texas, and I believe other states, I mean, the lines at these college campuses were hours obviously young people, a lot of them wait too long to register, this and that. But you were seeing in Texas lines at college campuses 4, 5, 6 hours. Also seems kind of intentional to me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, one of the big reasons for it, there's a couple reasons for this. Yeah, going after the young voter. I got to tell you, that's the story of this race, is the attack on young voters. I've never seen it like this. And so, and it started with 16 really in full force. So that in Texas, one of the reasons why you had massive lines at schools. Well, one, you have schools there with over 100,000 students, add in faculty and related services people, and you got 200,000 people. There's cities, and they either have no voting station. I'm working with the Andrew Goodman Foundation on that issue. You have some states like Florida and North Carolina prohibited voting on campuses, and these campuses, some of them are bigger than most American cities. So obviously you have to, like, in fact, again, in Georgia, my daughter in Savannah, okay, her school didn't have a single voting station. She had to take like a $12 Uber ride to get to the convention center to vote. This is the games that they play. And in Texas, as in Wisconsin, one of the reasons for the lines is that you need a state photo ID to vote, and they didn't let you use your student ID. You could use your gun permit, you could use your driver's license, but most students actually don't have cars and don't have licenses, or they have an out-of-state license. So you couldn't use your student license at all in Texas. So kids would get to the front of the line. They say, "Where's your ID?" They show their state ID. It's University of Texas state ID, but they say, "No, you can't use that to vote." So then they have to go have fights, look for other ID, and then, of course, get the old provisional ballot, where you get to fill out your own SAT.
Right.
And it gets thrown in the garbage after you fill out that. So that takes a long time. So that holds up the lines. They know that. And in Wisconsin, they pulled the same trick. You can't use the regular university ID. 182,000 University of Wisconsin students were disenfranchised like that. 50,000 African Americans disenfranchised like that by the change in the ID laws in Wisconsin. So Biden squeaked by because, in part, the reason why it wasn't a landslide is that this trickery with the ID laws in Wisconsin. So, and in Texas, same thing. So they are really going after young voters. And in Florida, there was a fight. They allowed some counties to put voting stations in schools and campuses. But in fact, the local county had agreed to it, and obviously the GOP counties are like, make them take cabs, make them march 4 miles.
And lastly, I mean, we still have 2 runoffs in Georgia. You broke with the ACLU that they've purged 200,000 people. Is it pie in the sky to think that some of that might be remedied before the runoffs?
Let me tell you, we wouldn't be talking about the runoff if it weren't for the massive program of returning these people to the voter rolls. I worked not only with the ACLU, but with Black Voters Matter, which took our list of people wrongly purged and sent out 98,000 postcards.
Wow.
Saying you've lost your vote, re-register now. We also had massive media op-eds. We really pushed, and of course, again, it doesn't hurt that Leo DiCaprio's site, Leo DiCaprio and his site released our films, which got tremendous coverage. So we use everything. We use videos, we use Instagram, we use postcards, we use telephone calls, working with the Southern Poverty Law Center. So you have to understand what people saw in Georgia was the effect of a massive, massive, massive voter protection drive, returning people to the voter rolls, exposing it, saying you may have lost your vote, check. So I think now we have till December 7th to get more people registered or back on the voter rolls. See, the worst thing about the purges is you don't know you've been purged. In other words, if you lost your registration, you knew it, well, okay, it's not that difficult to re-register. But what if you don't know it's been purged? It's like if someone stole your wallet, you got a pickpocket, you don't know it. You don't realize it till you go to reach for your wallet later. Right. So now it's election day and they tell you you're off the voter rolls. I was at the polling station with a guy, broadcaster in Atlanta named Raheem Shabazz. He was knocked off the rolls. So he said, oh, here, take a provisional ballot, fill this out, which if you're not registered, the federal law requires that you get a provisional ballot. State law prohibits you from having that ballot counted.
Right.
So, I kid you not. So, but they did give him a little sticker that says, I voted, with a little Georgia peach on it. So he says, I got the sticker. And he says, so his vote, his provisional ballot was about as valuable as the sticker is to a real peach. As he said, what am I supposed to do with this? Eat it? So there you go. So we accomplished a lot already. We have a lot more to accomplish. We have a lot more to accomplish now. And that's the thing. And again, it's not about electing the Democrat or whatever. It's about literally allowing people to vote.
Well said. GregPalast.com?
GregPalast.com. And also, you not only get the films and the books, you can also download our comic book, 48 pages I did with the great comic artist Ted Rall, free download, called The Art of the Steal. And it's about how they've been stealing these elections. And for God's sake, go to GregPalast.com and check your registration. And if you're in Georgia. And if you're not in Georgia, by the way, this is not a bad time to think about, once again, in case things screwed up, check your registration again.
And I also want to credit you because as an independent journalist, a couple years younger, I also have dealt with major investigations that you can't get these corporate outlets to touch. So the fact that you continue, even going international outlets, to investigate these things when these outlets in America that should be all over this, give you the backside. We really appreciate your determination.
I really appreciate that you're taking this word out. So you guys are great. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.